A particularly stormy pattern is setting up for most of the lower 48 over at least the next week, probably beyond that. Here in my recording area, Western New York, we may escape the worst of it most of the time, but we've got a few systems to keep an eye on as well. The first storm system, which has received quite a bit of social media hype and network hype, is the storm this weekend, which has in some network newscasts been portrayed as a system that's going to bring heavy snow to Philly and New York City and Boston. The track of the storm, most favored by most models, would take most of the heavy snow with this storm, and it doesn't look to be an overwhelming nor'easter, although it will be a strong storm system. The heavier snow will be west of I 95 in the higher terrain of eastern Pennsylvania, the Catskills, the Poconos, and parts of the interior of southern and eastern New England. In my mind, it appears that Philly, New York City, and Boston will escape any serious accumulations. And while that is not a lock, it just doesn't look like this is the setup to finally break the snow drought. New York, and Philly, and Boston have had a snow drought going on for a couple of years. And this one had shown some early signs for snow lovers, but doesn't look like that's going to be occurring. Now, the storm system could also bring some minor coastal flooding to New Jersey and New England with some gusty winds. Here in western New York, we're likely to see some snow showers beginning to develop on Saturday and continuing on and off into Sunday. However, every indication is that these snow showers will be light and will not present any major impediments to travel, and our winds here will not be a big deal, and temperatures on Saturday and Sunday should reach the mid 30s, so even this modest light snow will have trouble sticking on a lot of the roadways. In the meantime, though, there is still another storm system that's going to come along out of the southern plains just a couple of days later, and that one is going to pack more of a punch. That storm system will pull up out of the southern plains, move across into Missouri, and head toward probably the northern Great Lakes. However, the track is not a lock. The European model in particular has this storm as much more powerful than the first weekend storm, to the extent that it has central pressures that are quite unusually low, and that can produce very strong winds. The system is most likely to bring the onset of some wet snow in western New York during Tuesday, probably in the afternoon. That will change to rain on a very gusty southeast wind. In fact, there could be some very strong gusts on southern tier hilltops and along the Lake Erie shoreline Tuesday night. While on the other side of the storm, there may be blizzard conditions which begin to fall west of Wichita, Kansas, and the Oklahoma Panhandle up into the upper Midwest and including Chicago, which has also had something of a snow drought. This storm has the potential to have a major impact on Chicago. Of course, that on Tuesday would produce significant air delays. The first storm this weekend may actually cause some modest delays for those attending the Bills Miami game with some scattered thunderstorms on Saturday for Saturday arrivals, and there still could be some lingering spotty convection into Sunday morning. So it may be that there could be some delays coming into the Miami area airports, depending on where the convection sets up. It does not look like a major severe weather outbreak, but it will bear watching. The second storm that I mentioned could, if the European model prevails, bring damaging wind gusts to western New York by Wednesday as chillier air underneath the storm sweeps in on west-southwest winds that could exceed 50 to 55 miles an hour in gusts. The sustained wind's not quite that strong. The American model is not as powerful with the storm. It has it on a somewhat different track, which would pose less of a threat. It appears that if we're going to get any lake effect behind this storm later on Wednesday and to Wednesday night and Thursday, westerly winds are more favored, which, if lake effect sets up, would favor the higher terrain south of the metro area. But this far in advance, that is anything but a lock as to whether we end up getting some southwest winds. The storm will bear watching, and you can rest assured, being the semi-retired guy that I am, I will be watching it. And then behind that storm system, models are pointing to another pretty strong storm system by next weekend coming up through the central United States. That one also tending to favor heavier snow west of western New York, but it could have some gradual lake effect potential in its wake. That's way too far in advance for any kind of definition in a forecast. As far as the polar vortex goes, there are now some pretty clear signs it is going to begin to sag toward the southwest. It's being disrupted initially by some warm air way up in the stratosphere, but it appears that its main target for the coldest air associated with this stretching of the polar vortex, or maybe even splitting of it, will first favor Montana, the Dakotas, Wyoming, and that the coldest air will stay west of the Great Lakes for several days and begin to inch and modify a little bit, moving toward the Great Lakes toward the 16th, 17th, and 18th, the mid-month period. And there may be some more extensive below average temperatures that last this time around, not just a 1 or 2 day shot. Cannot possibly speculate on lake effect potential. Of course, the lake is still warm. There is going to be some cooling of the lake by the time that coldest air gets here, but there is no chance there will be ice on Lake Erie by the time that colder flow aloft reaches down to the surface and gets into western New York. The lake will still be wide open. So there is some potential that we'll have to monitor, but I assure you there is no meteorologist alive who can tell you on January 4th whether we're facing a major lake effect storm in western New York. For western New York, the most notable threat could be, if the European model prevails, high winds on Wednesday in the wake of that very strong storm moving toward the northern Great Lakes. That's not a lock either. The American model does not have that storm with as much oomph. The central pressure on it is not as deep as the European model. So that's the basic picture around here. There is no sign of a major snowstorm heading for western New York, and there's little sign of major snows in Philadelphia, New York City, or Boston, but they're going to be close enough by to the northwest of those cities that a shift in the track of this storm could change that. But right now, all the models seem to be in agreement. And as far as models changing, now that the storm is inland, it's getting better sampling from weather balloons at least twice a day. We're getting more data on the storm, so the models theoretically become more reliable once we start to get the soundings from the weather balloons into the models, where there's less data coming in when the storm center, as it was still out in the Pacific. And now that it's well inland, it's going to be somewhat easier to monitor. So that's what we have here, a slow transition to wintry temperatures here in the eastern Great Lakes. We'll get seasonable temperatures as we head into Sunday and Monday, then a warm up on Tuesday ahead of that storm with those gusty southeast winds, and then cooling back down again on strong to possibly high winds Wednesday. But right now it looks like seasonable chill rather than extreme cold. The extreme cold will be targeting first Montana, Wyoming, the western Dakotas, and the like. It's going to take quite a while for that cold air to make it to the eastern Great Lakes. I hope you found this podcast episode useful. If you do like this podcast, Don Paul's Bits O' Blather on weather, climate, and occasionally some humor, I hope you will follow. That's the name of the game for a guy like me, and share. It really does help. I'm on all the major platforms. And by the way, if you're watching this audio on YouTube, please subscribe. That matters too. Thanks for listening this far.